Hello, and welcome to this episode of Felonious, a podcast where we discuss the realm of true crime. From chilling cold cases to the wild and wacky, we'll explore it all with a perfect blend of seriousness and humour. My name is Emma.
And I'm Nazia. To keep up to date with what's coming up, be sure to follow us on Instagram at felonious.pod and visit our website feloniouspod.com. We hope you enjoy this episode, so let's get to it. Okay, so we're back for part 2 of Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier. Can't forget her.
In today's episode, we will be discussing the arrest and trial of Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier. In part 1, we discussed the rape, abduction and murders of their victims, at least the ones we know of so far. Michel was finally caught in 2003, but it was his wife who caved in. Her confessions made investigators realise just what sort of a monster they were dealing with, and that she wasn't quite the submissive wife she wanted everyone to believe her to be. Just like the last episode, there's going to be a lot of mentions of incest and discussions around sex and sexual abuse. Also mentions of drug use and murder. A lot of the research stemmed from documentaries such as the Journeyman documentary called Fourniret, which was released in 2008, and Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer, an episode of that on British TV in 2015, and the most recent documentary on Netflix, which aired last year, Monique Olivier, Accessory to Evil. And we also read various news articles.
So in June 2003, in a town on the Franco-Belgian border, Michel, rather than Monique, approached a 13-year-old called Marie. He asked her for directions and asked her to get into his vehicle for help. As soon as she got into the vehicle, he became extremely frightening.
He asked if she was a virgin and told her he was going to take her virginity. She asked him if he was going to kill her, to which he said no with a big smile. But the girl was terrified and knew he was going to kill her.
Marie saw a map of France and Belgium and started to pray out loud. This annoyed Michel and he threatened to slit her throat. She also asked him if he was a member of the Dutroux gang, to which he replied he wasn't and that he was worse. So the Dutroux gang, that's related to Marc Dutroux, who we mentioned in the last episode, who was one of the suspects for the murders that Michel had actually committed.
Right, and he was a serial killer himself, wasn't he?
Yeah. Monique tied the girl's hands to her feet and she was put into the back of the van. About 30 minutes into the drive, Marie managed to untie herself and started to kick the door until it opened. The van had stopped at a traffic light when she jumped out. She stopped another motorist and told him what had happened. The motorist told her that the couple may turn back, which they did. As they drove past, the motorist took a note of the van's registration number. They went to the nearest police station and reported the crime. On the 26th of June 2003, Michel was arrested. The connection between Céline Saison and Manania Tumpong became obvious. Within a 40-kilometre strip across the border, Michel had his residence. He had abducted the two girls, disposed of their bodies, and then attempted to abduct the girl who had managed to escape and report him to the police. The next day, police searched his house. Didier Velen, director of federal police in Namur, stated that there was a lot of pressure given the case of Marc Dutroux. Monique arrived at the house unaware of Michel's arrest. The fact he hadn't been home overnight did not surprise her, as he was often away for several days. Police initially got the impression she was a pushover who asked no questions. During the search, they found handcuffs, masks to put someone to sleep with, condoms, pistols, handguns, and children's clothing. They also found rope, scotch tape, gags, ski masks, and other items which could be used by a burglar. According to neighbours, after Michel was arrested, Monique shut herself away for several days. About a week after his arrest, they saw a bonfire in her garden, which burnt all afternoon, suggesting that she was burning evidence which had not been found.
By July, when police realised they weren't going to get anywhere with interrogating Michel, they turned their attention to Monique, who was still free at the time.
As she had no prior convictions, they didn't suspect her of anything. The interviews were long and painful, as Monique would hang her head low, spending minutes staring and not speaking. The police got the impression she was protecting him, as she depended on him psychologically and materially. They thought she was under his influence and was afraid of him, as he could be violent with her. The police learned that he worked in the woods and would often be away for several days at a time. When they searched their home and the van, they were able to find clues such as gas station receipts, a restaurant receipt, and a toll document. These helped them identify the locations he had been to, where there was a potential connection to previous abductions.
By June 2004, Michel had been detained for a year, but Monique was still free. Investigators had over 100 interviews with both of them, which gave them nothing. They needed weightier evidence, otherwise the council chamber would free Michel. As their evidence accumulated, they continued to question Monique and became more specific with their questions. She started feeling the pressure and finally cracked on the 22nd of June 2004. During a routine interview, within 30 minutes she told the investigators about 6 murders dating back to 1987. She then told them about 2 more murders. The team of investigators at one point wondered if she was telling the truth because of the scale of her revelations. In subsequent interviews, Monique explained how Michel abducted, raped, and killed the girls. She said she didn't intervene for fear he would do the same to her. It has been suggested that she finally cracked, thinking of Marc Dutroux, whose wife received a 30-year prison sentence as an accomplice to his crimes. Monique hoped to avoid the same fate. Self-preservation kicked in, and she gave her husband up and admitted to all the other murders. In total, Monique told Belgian detectives about at least 17 murders. Michel would go on to admit to only 8 of them. On the 30th of June 2004, Michel was summoned and found out from the radio that his wife had turned him in. He said she was telling the truth and said he had put pressure on her throughout their relationship. He didn't say she had any responsibility or role in the crimes he had committed, explaining she didn't have the choice to refuse what he imposed and that she accepted it to survive. Some of the investigators felt that Monique did have some responsibility and had more to confess. They interviewed her again, and she finally confessed to being a co-offender, an active participant in the abductions, rapes, and murders. This shocked the investigators as she seemed so ordinary. Monique even accused Michel of killing the family au pair. In the Netflix documentary, it was stated that the au pair technique was his favourite for attracting young girls to their property. They had hired an au pair to look after Selim. According to Monique, one night Michel went into the au pair's bedroom. She heard screaming and crying, and then never saw the girl again, assuming he had also killed her. No bodies have ever been found. Monique also told investigators she knew the fate of the au pairs when they hired them, and that more than one babysitter had been hired and then killed by her husband in Belgium. She wrote the ads herself, which specified that the girls had to live alone, with no parents. She claimed that Michel had murdered 6 au pairs, which he denied. There have also been no missing persons reports to suggest any au pairs have gone missing, so it is unclear if Monique is telling the truth. Furthermore, Michel only spoke about murders police had evidence for. He probably had other victims. He also admitted that he would have continued killing if he was not caught. Monique's lawyer, Richard Delgen, met with her in 2004. In the Netflix documentary, he described her as being very defensive and nervous. His personal opinion of her is that if she had met someone good, she would have done good, and that she was not motivated by evil, except she met Michel. One of the expert court psychologists described her as misleading, and that she spun a story of a poor, submissive woman who was afraid of her husband. Another described her performance as long and difficult. In July 2004, after Michel first confessed to the rape and murder of Elizabeth Brichet, Investigators learned that he owned a chateau where he buried some of his victims. Chateau de Satou became the most notorious chateau in France. It was in a black forest of about 15 hectares. Michel sketched a map on a piece of paper to indicate roughly where Elizabeth's body was buried. The first body they dug up was of Jean-Marie Desremont. There was a long silence as the investigators were stunned by the discovery. Michel was asked where the other bodies were. Elizabeth Brichet's body was then found, which was buried closer to the chateau. Everyone who had been working on the case of Elizabeth recognised the item of clothing that was found with her body. It was the purple raincoat she was wearing when she was abducted in 1989, which confirmed it was her body. Francis Nakbar recorded Michel then saying to him, "Do you realise, Mr. Prosecutor, that when I strangled and killed this girl, she was the same age as your daughter now?" He also recalled Monique saying to him, "Oh, it's sad, but can you see the situation I'm in?" as she showed him her handcuffs. That was the only time he saw her cry. What a fucking disgusting man.
Yeah, and woman as well. Like, I think that's what stunned the investigators was the lack of emotion. And when she did show any emotion, it was more concerning herself. The trial began in Charleville on the 27th of March 2008. There were approximately 400 journalists. The forecourt was full, and there were large press tents with 200 to 300 seats, which could not accommodate everyone. When Michel and Monique were brought to court, they were protected by armed police. Investigators and experts understood Michel as a clearly perverted and organised serial killer, but Monique was the fascinating perpetrator in the case, as she was a woman and a mother. Yeah, it kind of just reminds me of Fred West and Rose West, which you mentioned last week.
Yeah.
About Rose West, and then it made me think of the Barbie and Ken killers. Do you know about them?
I have heard about them, but remind me.
Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. So if I remember correctly, they were a couple and he convinced her to do horrible things to her sisters and other young kids, if I remember correctly. But yes, the fact that there's female accomplices, and at least in Rose West's case and Monique Olivier's case, you know, they're mothers, they have children of their own, yet they're willing to allow their partners and even help their partners commit crimes.
Against other children.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, that's why she's the most hated woman in France, because with Michel, it's not surprising because you expect a man to have that level of criminality, but when it's a woman, you don't expect it. So it's all the more shocking. Yeah.
The amount of crimes that a man has committed.
Yeah, it's like the whole bear debate, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably women that have committed these sorts of crimes and maybe haven't been caught, or maybe just haven't been like registered in the public conscious.
Yeah, it's just more shocking when it's a woman.
Yeah.
Especially as they used their child as bait as well. It's just...
Yeah, it's sick.
Yeah. So the challenge for the prosecutors was to get the maximum sentence for both of them. This was guaranteed for Michel, but unclear for Monique. Monique's lawyer argued that without Michel, she would never have become a criminal, and that if he got a life sentence, she shouldn't get one. He also argued that while everyone hated Monique because she was a woman and a mother, Michel should have the same level of hate as he was a father. Yeah and no. I kind of see what he's saying, but at the same time, no. He told the press that he believed Monique was a weak, cowardly person who was scared of everything.
Well, that's what he thought about women in general anyway, clearly.
Yeah, exactly. When Monique was first arrested, she had roots showing in her hair and was hunched over. At the trial, it was clear she had a makeover, such as an elegant haircut with even tones, and was well groomed. However, when she was asked questions, she would leave long pauses before answering with a stammer or mumble. Michel wanted a closed session and did not wish to be photographed. Monique told the court, "I want to explain that I am a victim, and when the women in the audience find out what I've been through, they will understand me."
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. She said she was a submissive wife, never able to stand up to her husband. When asked what she thought of men, she said that she could no longer stand them. She said that loving someone and being loved by someone was something that she had never experienced. She was scared of Michel and had to do as she was told for fear of being killed by him.
Doesn't mean that you have to do everything.
She had plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
To, all those times that he was away for days on end, and
when he was at work,
or when he sent her to drive, to pick up someone else while he hid or whatever, and the fact that she may have burnt evidence after his arrest.
Yeah.
So when Monique was assessed in 2004 and asked about the male identity, she identified men as all-powerful while women had little standing. Sorry, this is quite funny. It's not funny, but it is quite funny. Michel described Monique as intelligent as a lobotomized chicken. Sorry. Who he constantly hit and could manipulate.
Yeah, that's not nice.
That's quite... I mean, if you take that outside of what we're talking about, it's quite a funny insult, but...
We're vegans.
Sorry, I know. Sorry, that's not very vegan of me to laugh at that.
He has his way with words, though, doesn't he? Like, membranes on legs.
I know, yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Monique was put through tests to determine her IQ. In one test, where the standard average score was 11, Monique scored 36 out of 40. In another, where the French average is 17, Monique scored 76. Her IQ scored at 131, which was in the top 2.2% of the French population. This showed her to be the potential manipulator and no longer Michel's victim. But yeah, this kind of made me wonder if she is in some way neurodivergent. Like, does her high IQ equate to emotional and social intelligence? I mean, obviously, I'm not saying anyone who's neurodivergent has the capability of being evil. Definitely not saying that. But given the way she presents herself, I don't know.
Well, yeah, it comes across that she's not very empathic and can't put herself in her victim's situation.
Yeah, and maybe Michel was making out that she was stupid, either because in some weird way he wanted to protect her, or because of how he viewed women. He wanted to be appearing as the more powerful and intelligent one, and probably would have felt undermined by her intelligence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's described her as a lobotomized chicken, and she is anything but based on her IQ levels.
Yeah, right.
So, but I mean, she's definitely not stupid, which is what he's trying to make her out to be. And then that works against her.
Yeah.
Because she's not a submissive pushover.
Yeah, exactly. So she fully understands what's going on.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like, did Michel groom Monique to be less intelligent than she eventually tested? Or
he might have maybe made her lose self-esteem somehow. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, sorry, this next bit is going to be disgusting. So it also emerged that during sex, Monique acted like the little girl or young woman reenacting the victims they had just abducted, abused and killed. She would ask Michel to, quote, make love to her, meaning like the victims. Michel would make his victims beg him to rape them before they died, and this is what Monique role-played. He was often impotent and depended on her to help him. Monique would also check if the victims were virgins, meaning that she was actually assaulting them herself.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah.
That sounds like she got a kick out of...
Yeah, she's getting something out of it as well. And the fact that she's that level of invasiveness and complicitness.
She must have been, like, totally attracted to the power that he had over these poor victims.
Maybe, I guess so.
Oh, Jesus. Find something normal to turn yourself on. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So when the trial was coming to an end in May 2008 and the time came for the defence closing arguments, something unusual took place. The victims' families all stood up and placed a rose and photos of the victims in front of the jurors and left the room. Isabelle Laville's mother said it was to pay homage to the girls instead of giving homage to Monique. Fourniret was convicted of 7 murders and sentenced to life in prison. Monique was given a life sentence of 28 years before being considered for parole, a sentence that had never been handed to a female criminal before. However, it did still show that the court made a slight distinction between her and Michel.
Which they shouldn't have done, really.
Yeah.
A fellow prisoner from Fleury-Mérogis in 1984, who had befriended Michel at the time, was shocked by the latest news. He decided to write to him, imploring him to confess to everything he did. Michel replied with sordid details of the murders he was convicted of, but then he also drew lines on blank pages, numbered, which he said he was leaving for the police to fill in. The numbers went from 10 to 35. From the murders we are aware of, there was a 10-year gap from 1990 to 2000, where Michel appears not to have raped or killed anyone, but he may very well have done. Stéphane Bourgeois, serial killer expert, said that Michel had stated on various occasions that he wanted to go hunting for victims at least twice a year, so it is very likely he was still committing crimes during that 10-year period. In July 2011, Michel and Monique divorced by mutual agreement. Monique's lawyer explained that she no longer wanted any contact with her ex-husband. In 2015, Eric Mouzon's lawyer, Eric Mouzon is the father of Estelle Mouzon, who disappeared in 2003 at the age of 9. The lawyer was going through unsolved cases. In May, she received a call from the law firm receptionist to inform her of a witness who wanted to talk to her about Monique. The witness was cellmates with her. She saw Eric, Estelle's father, on the television and asked Monique if Michel was responsible. Monique replied, "She's his type of child." Estelle had left school at 6 p.m. on the 9th of January 2003, which was a 20-minute walk from her home. When she didn't return home, her mother went around all of the neighbours to see if anyone had seen her, but no one had. She called Estelle's father at around 8:30 to say she was missing. The police searched a 25-kilometre radius around Guermantes, in fields, forests and woods. They also looked in wells and waterways. With no evidence or clues and no witnesses, it was impossible to find her. Everyone who lived on the route from Estelle's school to her home was interviewed. One of her classmates told the police how on one occasion a man approached her, offering her a lift because her bag looked heavy. She declined, saying she was already at her home. From this statement, police were able to get a sketch of the suspect and knew he had a van. When Michel was arrested in June, he immediately became a suspect for Estelle Mouzon's case. However, a record of a phone call made from his house to his eldest son on his birthday created an alibi for him. His home was 250 kilometres away from where Estelle had disappeared. In prison, Monique told her cellmate that she made the phone call for Michel's alibi. He had instructed her to dial his son's number if he was not back at a certain time, as he would be out hunting for little virgins. Monique told the examining magistrate that she made the call to his son at his request on the 9th of January 2003, the day Estelle Mouzon disappeared, confessing to a case that could have remained unsolved for many more years, if not forever. At the end of 2020, a reconstruction took place with the couple present, the first time they had been together since being arrested. Monique had physical contact with him while trying to encourage him to remember what happened and tell the investigators. He admitted to killing her, however, the searches did not lead to Estelle's body.
And I wonder at this point if it's possible that he would have been suffering from memory loss at this point because he was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's my pondering anyway. Because when was this? Yeah, 2020. I wonder if he was having memory loss by that point, so he probably couldn't
remember details.
Wouldn't have been helpful. Because Michel, he died on the 10th of May 2021 in prison at the age of 79 after suffering from Alzheimer's and heart problems. Before he died, he confessed to 11 murders. After his death, Monique told investigators that she saw Estelle after she had been kidnapped. She watched over her while Michel went to work to continue their routine. Estelle was asking for her mother and was asking Monique to let her go. She told her that she would see her mother soon, knowing full well that she would be raped and then killed. She said that she saw Estelle's body in a shower curtain and brought Michel the shovel and pickaxe he used to bury her body. However, when a search was carried out to find Estelle's body in the forest of Izancourt-et-Rumel, nothing was found.
In July 2023, Salim Olivier, aged 33, was taken into custody in Nice for attempted rape. He pursued a 16-year-old girl in the lift of a building where he allegedly complimented her appearance before putting his hand over her mouth and sexually assaulting her. The girl screamed and Salim fled the scene. However, he was apprehended 2 days later thanks to being caught on video surveillance.
His apartment was searched for fear that this was not his first attempt, despite him having no previous criminal record. He could face 15 years in prison. While his parents committed their crimes, they sometimes left Salim with neighbours to look after him. In front of him, his parents used code words such as MSP for membranes on legs. I guess in French that's membrane sur pied, don't know. When Salim was 6 years old, his father brought an au pair to their home. Monique slept with Salim in their van while Michel carried out his crimes, so their son couldn't hear the screams and commotion.
During Michel's 2004 hearing, Salim described how his father was violent with his words and constantly made Salim work for his advantage. Monique later explained part of the reason she stayed with Michel was before she had already lost custody of 2 children. She didn't want to go through the same thing with Salim.
So he hasn't had a court hearing for this sexual assault?
No, last time I checked, no. Salim was just a teenager when his parents were arrested. He was left in the house by himself for an entire week before taken into the care of an uncle. He would have been old enough to understand that his parents used him as bait for their victims. He addressed his parents by their first names rather than mum or dad and changed his own name. During rare media appearances, he kept his face covered with a hood and sunglasses and sometimes had his voice modified. When his father passed away, he said it was a relief.
In December 2023, after a 3-week trial, Monique was handed a second life sentence with a minimum of 20 years for her involvement in the rape and murder of Joanna Parish and Marie-Angèle Domès, and her involvement in the kidnapping of Estelle Mouzon, whose body still remains undiscovered. During the trial, Monique said that Joanna Parish's rape and murder may have happened in the house in Saint-Cyr-les-Colons and not in the van. Before the verdict, Monique told the court, "I regret everything I did and I ask for forgiveness from the families of the victims, while knowing that it is unforgivable." The Parish family had waited 30 years for the trial and went to Auxerre at least 15 times at a cost of €60,000. They were determined to get justice for their daughter. Joanna's parents feel like the French justice system had failed them, especially when they failed to connect Joanna's death to Michel, as Monique hadn't mentioned her name in her confession, and her murder wasn't included in the original trial. In the Netflix documentary, they describe how the couple lived an otherwise normal life. They had parties with neighbours, went to communion. Monique was a housewife. Meanwhile, she helped her husband abduct, rape and murder young girls while he was burying their bodies on their property. Some neighbours described them as unhappy people or more like friends than a couple. Michel was aggressive with neighbours, and that Michel could kill cats because he didn't like them on his property. Alain Baer remarked, "How do you expect the neighbours to imagine that behind this unremarkable couple with no issues hides the worst criminals in recent years?" They played on the fact that children want to help. They exploited their goodwill. They would use the fact Monique was a woman to gain their trust. Michel had been a sex offender for 20 years and had multiple convictions before he became a serial killer at the age of 45. Monique played a crucial role in this transition. Stéphane Bourgeois, a serial killer expert, explained in the Journeyman documentary that it generally takes 15 years or so for the serial killer personality to form, and like all serial killers, Michel put on a facade that he was a sophisticated and well-read man, but it was just a sham. Monique told her lawyer that she was a cog in the wheel. She was afraid of Michel and that she regrets it all. She says, "You shouldn't think of me being the same as him or put me in the same box." However, a lot of lawyers and experts felt she had dominance over Michel, not just because of her high IQ, but also because without her, he wouldn't have been able to lure his victims in. She got sexual gratification out of his sexual gratification. The Leroy family lawyer described a perverse love between the two that could only be consummated with a third person, the victim. It was because Monique was there that the killing started. The lawyer for the Parish and Disramal cases believes she dominated him by supplying his victim.
Yeah.
Heavy.
That was a heavy one. And yeah, I have to agree with that last point. She clearly wasn't the
damsel in distress.
Yeah, she wasn't the pushover that she was initially trying to portray herself as.
Yeah, it seems to be that she got a kick out of what he was doing, and so therefore probably encouraged him to commit more of these crimes.
Yeah.
That's my take on things anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, as we've said a couple of times, like, he didn't start murdering his victims until he met her. But then I guess at some point he felt so emboldened that he would even go off and do it without her. Or maybe he didn't actually commit murders without her, and when he was going hunting without her, he was literally just assaulting people. And maybe that's why the police haven't come across... I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll never know because he's passed away, and they'll only know what she's confessed to, and she could only confess to what she was involved with.
I feel so sorry for the families involved because a lot of them don't know where their loved ones are, and a lot of them know what their loved one went through before they died.
But they don't have the body.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just so evil.
Yeah, and it must have been so frustrating for the Parish family to have constantly made these trips to France just to get answers, and for it to have taken that long to get an answer.
And now it sounds like the son is going along the same route.
The apple has not fallen far from the tree, as they say.
Shall I see if a court date has been announced for that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm reading a thing from this part of the Wall Street Journal, I think. So Salim has given evidence on Monique's trial, and he's wearing like an elaborate disguise in a video.
Yeah.
And he says, "No one is waiting for you outside. What do you have to hide? Free yourself from the burden." And she says, "You're not going to lecture me. I've said everything there is to say." And then she adds, "And then take off this disguise. You look like your father."
Okay.
He testified wearing a blue down jacket zipped to the neck, and his hands were in his pocket. He had a wig on his head and big glasses on his nose and a fake moustache.
So I've got a different article from a French website, and I guess it's talking about the same day where he's begging his mother to talk to the families. And he said something, I believe he's quoted to have said, "I am an accident." Maybe.
Possibly.
But yeah, there's nothing about the trial he's going through.
No, but he did say that he changed his name, so... Salim Olivier kept under an electronic bracelet and placed under house arrest outside Nice.
Yeah, so in the summer he was indicted, but there hasn't been an update on that since July 2023. So that was in July 2023, and he's testified at his mother's court date in December of that same year. So we'll see, I guess, if we get any updates.
We'll update you.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so that was a heavy one. And our next case is going to be a heavy one as well.
Are we doing the honour killings?
Yeah, it's going to be a longer one as well.
Yeah, so I think we have a few cases under that episode, honour killings. Yeah, and we've taken it by... Well, the first part's like a country-by-country basis as well. So, yeah, that'll be next time.
Yes, we'll let you know. Keep up to date on our socials. And don't forget to follow and subscribe. Thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more information about the show on our website at feloniouspod.com or on our Instagram at felonious.pod.
Links to our show notes can be found in the episode description, as well as through our website and social media. You can visit our Contact Us page and tell us what you think about the show and if there are any cases you would like us to cover. We hope you join us for the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.